Hey, what's going on, guys? Kalamazi here, and this is going to be part 3 of 3 in my Shadowlands Warlock spec review. Today, we're going to be talking about Affliction Warlocks and how they're currently performing in Shadowlands Beta. Now, Affliction is, like I said, the final spec we're going to be reviewing here, and that's for a few reasons. Number one, if you guys didn't see it, about a week and a half ago, my current state of Affliction Warlock overview went up on a Wowhead, which I'll put a link to somewhere over here. So if you guys haven't seen it, feel free to check that out. I wanted to give it a little bit of time before I made this video. Number one, to give room for potential changes, and two, honestly, just sort of because I think Affliction as a whole, even when I wrote that article, is in a pretty good spot. We might be a little overpowered, but our toolkit is in a good spot. Now, I do want to mention here before we get into the video that I have not been around for a few days. I've lost my voice, but I'm feeling better now. I, however, have been working on updating my Shadowlands weak auras for Warlock. I don't have them all released publicly yet, but if you want, it should be a few days. I'm looking to hammer out a few things here and there. But if you want any of them, all my weak auras, profiles, and add-ons are free, available to you guys on my Twitch. Just type !WA in chat or scroll down into the channel description. So, let's get right into this video and talk about Affliction Warlock talents, spells, new abilities, returning abilities, conduits, covenants, soulbinds, everything that makes Affliction Warlock great so far in Shadowlands. Okay, now following suit with the past two videos on Destro and Demo, I want to start talking about the baseline Affliction Warlock spells, not necessarily talents, we'll get to that in a minute here, that have changed, I guess have been introduced in Shadowlands. So, starting off in the first page here for Affliction, there's not a whole lot that's new here outside of one ability, and that ability is our main ability in Shadowlands. It is Malefic Rapture. It is our Soul Shard Spender. It is a 1.5-ish second cast that says your damaging periodic effects erupt on all targets within line of sight. Well, first of all, line of sight is still not working properly. It still does damage to targets that aren't in LOS, but that's something else for another time. Causing 460 shadow damage per effect. Now, per effect means per dot. So the more dots you have rolling on one target, the more damage Malefic Rapture is going to do. Rapture is an exceptionally strong single target and AoE spender. Previously, I guess currently, in BFA, Affliction in Mythic Plus and in a handful of settings is plagued by a glacially slow ramp-up time. We are very slow when it comes to Mythic Plus. We are probably the worst spec in Mythic Plus out of any in the game, taking our damage profile and Warlock utility, or lack thereof, into account. However, Rapture does a whole lot for Affliction in Shadowlands. We might still have to apply our corruption by a seed and get our agonies rolling, maybe cast a Vile Taint, but once you do, Rapture helps shore up the lost damage, or that missing damage, I guess, per se, comparing ourselves to a bursty class, very quickly. Affliction's damage profile is incredibly strong with Malefic Rapture. Now you might be asking, well, what happened to Unstable Affliction? Nothing. It's still here, in a sense. Unstable Affliction has actually changed a lot. It does not cost a Soul Shard anymore. It is free to cast. It also has a 16-second baseline duration, which is actually incredible. As you can see here, it is 21 seconds, which I forgot I'm on a 57 character. At 52, 54, and 56, you gain additional improved abilities. I believe 52 or 54, we'll look at it in a minute here, is the one that increases UA's duration by 5 more seconds. So we have a 21-second Unstable Affliction. It does deal a lot of damage, and it feels really odd not having to refresh it anywhere near as often as we do on live. Now, they did remove the damage amp on this, the 10% damage amp, which sort of makes sense seeing as how it was changed, and also sort of partially, I imagine, because Shadow's Embrace is now also baseline for Affliction Warlocks. This used to be a talent right here, but this has been replaced with Dark Caller, which we'll get to in a minute. Shadow's Embrace does indeed stack off of Shadow Bolt, as well as Drain Soul. It stacks much faster off of Drain Soul, being 3 actual ticks within 1 Drain Soul versus 3 whole Shadow Bolt cast, and Haunt does also apply 1 stack of Shadow's Embrace if you're playing the talent. Now, going back to UA here, it is indeed limited to 1, as you can see, limit 1. The issue with that is, it's not limited to 1 per target, it's limited to 1 target total. If you have a single target boss, you'll have 1 UA rolling on that boss. If you have 10,000 mobs engaged in combat, I'm being a bit excessive here, but you can only have 1 UA rolling on 1 target. Now, that does indeed I don't want to say pose problems, but change up Affliction's toolkit a bit. You know, one of the reasons as to why I was frustrated with it initially was because, well, looking at how BFA is, you can spread multiple UAs to multiple targets for that 10% damage amp, which also sort of goes hand in hand with Malefic Rapture damage scaling. But the other interesting part here, Unstable Affliction still generates a soul shard if the target dies while UA is on it. So this gives you a way of building a whole lot of soul shards really quickly when heading from one pack to the next in Mythic Plus, in combination with Drain Soul, or even on bosses raiding Mythic Plus when there are smaller adds that are dying. These changes to UA are very, very impressive. The more I've played with this version of UA, honestly, the more I like it. Now, there are a handful of abilities that have returned to Warlock as a whole, which we talked about before. The 4 curses: Exhaustion, Wreck, Tongues, and Weakness. And we also have Demonic Circle going baseline as well. Now, at this current point in time, Wreck and I suppose Weakness are the ones that you really care about as far as bosses go. Oh, and Fell Domination has also made a return from the classic WoW days. It basically gives you an instant cast pet. It's 0.5 seconds, but it's something, I suppose. So, let's talk a bit about talents now for Affliction Warlocks and Shadowlands, because sort of similar to how our Soul Shard Spender has changed, a lot of those talents have also changed. Okay, and very briefly, I forgot to mention, if you're wondering why I'm still level 57, my character is bugged on beta right now. Choosing a covenant during Thursday's raid testing made it so that you were stuck with that covenant, and I can't complete the quest line in Ardenweald. I've been 57 for 4 days now, and I'm hoping it's fixed this Wednesday in a build. If it's not, well, we're leveling again. So, regardless, let's get into some talents here and talk about what makes this version of AF just better, I feel, than BFA almost completely. 15 row here. Nothing has really changed as far as Nightfall's text here says. However, there was sort of a internal change they made here. On live right now, if you have 1 corruption rolling or 1,000 corruptions rolling at the same time, Nightfall has the same chance of proccing. However, in Shadowlands, the more corruptions you have rolling, the higher chance Nightfall has to proc, which has been something that we've been asking for a long time. This as, you know, ramifications in Mythic Plus, on a lot of council-based fights in, you know, raiding Castle Nathri, which there are a handful of. This is a good change. This has been something, it just makes sense as well. This is a really good change, so I'm happy about that Nightfall change there. In the second slot here, we have Inevitable Demise, which is the Azerite talent from BFA. It is straight up the Drain Life Agony Azerite trait. You might wonder what's missing in this row here. Well, Death Bolt is missing, and it's now a PvP talent, which actually hits really hard from what I heard. So, ID is back, Nightfall is back, and we still have Drain Soul here. Now, Drain Soul, their sims aren't out for anything at this point. However, Drain Soul still does have the execute damage amp with the target below 20% health. It stacks Shadow's Embrace faster, which is passive, and just overall, I think brings the most to AF in both the Mythic Plus and raiding scenario for the most part. Now, there are a lot of intricacies of Drain Soul, which we'll get to in a little bit here, talking about Decimating Bolt, other covenants, and things like that, which is one of the reasons why AF is so incredibly strong right now. There is a bit of an issue in this row, I feel, though, and I pointed this out in my Wowhead article as well, is that these talents feel redundant in a sense. You want all of these talents sort of in the same setting within reason, right? You want Nightfall when you're going to have multiple corruptions rolling, so Council, ad-based bosses, Mythic Plus. You want Inevitable Demise when you have multiple targets, Council-based bosses, Mythic Plus. You want Drain Soul, single target, most likely, potentially. But you also have that Soul Shard sniping value in Mythic Plus and raid bosses. This does bring, I mean, on the surface, the most single target damage. No one knows about tuning at this point, but I would really like to see this row changed up a bit. I don't know exactly where, but I would love to be able to play both ID and Drain Soul together. Maybe moving ID to a different spot here. I'm not really sure, but it's an awesome talent, but I think for the most part, probably going to be overshadowed by Drain Soul a good bit of the time. So getting into the 25 row here, we have Writhe and Agony, Absolute Corruption, and Siphon Life. Now, Writhe and Agony has been changed. This is sort of a hybrid of Sudden Onset and the Writhe we have on live now in BFA. It now goes to 18 stacks and starts at 4 stacks, which is the Sudden Onset Azerite trait as well. This is probably a needed change. Writhe and Agony for the most part, unless you're playing triple SO, hasn't really been incredibly competitive for a while. It hasn't. It's a good change. It's a welcome change. So I think it was needed for a few reasons. Also to further increase its damage in a single target-esque setting, or 2 targets versus playing Siphon Life and trying to manage that on 2 targets because of Rapture scaling with more dots on each target. Absolute Corruption, the same. Permanent Corruption, damage amp, solid talent. Siphon Life, also the same. The interesting thing here is that when you're looking at a single target fight, or even, I guess, a council-based fight, you have obviously Writhe and Agony increasing Agony's damage, which is going to do more damage than your Agony, say, running Siphon Life, or even Absolute Corruption. The interesting thing here, and this is something I just wanted to point out as something to keep your eye on. It'll just depend on tuning. Even if Siphon Life ends up being a bit lower pure damage-wise compared to, let's say, Writhe and Agony, Siphon Life being a 3rd dot because you have Agony, Corruption, and Siphon Life in single target or 2 target versus just Agony and Corruption in single target or 2 target could very well push Siphon Life as being our go-to in other scenarios where it might not necessarily be the case due to Malefic Rapture scaling. So it's just something I wanted to point out. But it's important to keep an eye on as well, tuning-wise. 30 rows the same here. Dark Pact did receive a buff to its modifier. You can have larger shields. Awesome. 35 row here. Sow the Seeds, Phantom Singularity, and Vile Taint. Vile Taint and Singularity are the same as live. Now, Sow the Seeds has been changed. It has been, I guess, reverted to its Legion form, where it implants 2 additional seeds. So Seed of Corruption launches 3 total seeds. The issue here is that Seed of Corruption and Rapture both cost a shard, and outside of casting your first corruption to apply your first Seed of Corruption to apply your corruptions, why else are you casting the spell? It costs a shard, but Rapture just does what this does better, I feel, on a shorter cast time, and it doesn't require damage to pop the seed. Now, it's going to be a tuning thing in a sense, but I'll be real. I mean, I would like Sow the Seeds to be relevant, but it's going to be, Rapture just causes a lot of weird tuning challenges, because even if they make Sow the Seeds straight up more powerful than Rapture, like by taking a talent here damage-wise, you have to factor in, well, okay, if I'm not playing Sow, am I playing Singularity or am I playing Vile Taint? Because Vile Taint applies a dot to every target that it hits, which deals damage as well as slowing them, and counts for another dot towards Malefic Rapture. Now, Phantom Singularity does cleave onto all the targets, but only applies 1 dot on twice the cooldown length. Now, Vile Taint does also cost a Soul Shard, but let's be real. There's a lot to take into account here. I just don't know what to do with Sow the Seeds. It doesn't feel like it's just enough. My suggestion in the Wowhead article was to have Sow the Seeds apply Agony when it pops, sort of a AoE misery kind of spell, similar to what Shadow Priests have. Now, on very large polls in Mythic Plus, that would probably be pretty strong, maybe pretty OP, but at the same time, I mean, because you're applying, let's take, for example, the first poll in Freehold, just for an example. I know we're in Shadowlands, but you're applying Corruption and Agony to 12, 14 targets at once, which seems pretty strong, because you're not going to dot 14 Agonies in that poll. You're not going to do it. You're going to throw a few up and go into your Dark Lair. But at the same time, that means you're not taking Singularity. You're not taking Vile Taint. So that's 1 less dot for Rapture on every target, as well as 1 less dot dealing more damage. You know what I'm saying? I think it's a relatively fair trade-off. It's sort of utility with a bit of a damage after Seed versus playing Taint and Phantom Singularity. Vile Taint. I know you guys love me saying that words. So I don't know. Sow the Seeds is one of those iconic abilities with Seed of Corruption, but it needs a buff. It needs to become relevant again. It probably just needs some kind of structural change or overhaul, or just to be tuned properly. 40 row here, we have Dark Fury, Mortal Coil, Howl of Terror. Dark Fury has been changed. The talent now also increases its radius by 2 yards. It's actually more relevant than it seems. It's made a difference in plus, but, Mortal Coil is the same. Howl of Terror has replaced Demonic Circle because it is now baseline. It is a 1.3 second cast. It's Howl of Terror from old days. It's cool, but I think for the most part, Coil is probably where I'm going to be. A 20% heal, an in cap. It's good. 45 row here. This is really the final row that has changes. This is the dead talent. Don't worry about it. So we have Dark Caller and we have Haunt. Sacrifice is still a mess for a lot of reasons. Haunt is the same. However, we also have Shadow's Embrace baseline, which has been replaced by Dark Caller. So having access to both those effects is impactful because it's not just, it doesn't just increase your dot damage. This is a 10% damage amp to everything, your trinkets, your procs, whatever Haunt is. And the same thing for Shadow's Embrace. It's a raw damage increase, which is pretty powerful depending on a lot of things. Shadow's Embrace has gone baseline, has been replaced with Dark Caller. Now, this is something that we gave feedback on in our feedback document, which, by the way, I'll have in the comment section below, or the description if you want to check it out, directly in the early stages, saying we need to have Dark Lair on a 2-minute CD if it's going to stay around. Now, I would rather return to the days of Soul Harvest, having our dots be more impactful, but if Dark Caller is going to stay around, it needs to be a 2-minute CD somewhere. I didn't think we had a talent just straight up saying, hey, it's 2 minutes, but we did. This goes a long way in Mythic Plus in further solidifying our damage profile, shoring it up. Also, on council fights, on bosses where you're going to get an extra Dark Lair by playing this talent, it's going to be exceptionally strong. On bosses that have kill times where you're not going to get an extra Dark Lair, Haunt, or more single target bosses, Haunt is probably going to be the choice you want to make. One more thing to point out here as well is that Dark Caller, in conjunction with Dark Soul Misery, does indeed sync both cooldowns, which is relevant. The last row here, nothing's really changed for the most part. It's still Soul Conduit, still Creeping Death, and still Dark Soul Misery. Strong abilities across the board. But I can say that I am excited about this version of Aff. These talent changes are impactful, and now that we've had a character wipe and are getting close to Mythic Plus, I really want to see how our damage profile is post Malefic Rapture buffs. What are Malefic Rapture buffs, you say? Well, let's talk about them. Now, before we get into those Malefic Rapture changes, I did mention and forgot to go over 3 abilities that are learned at 52, 54, and 56. So the first one here is Shadow's Embrace. We talked about it. Shadow's Embrace is now baseline. This is learned at level 52. So Blizzard has made an attempt to make leveling matter more, feel like it matters more. It's cool having some abilities you learn along the way, progressing through Shadowlands. 52, you get Shadow's Embrace baseline. 54, you get Corruption, rank 3. Corruption now instantly deals 93 damage. Now, this sounds pretty awesome. And when I saw this, I was like, oh, this could actually be really cool with Sow the Seeds, because, hey, you know, you have 3 seeds popping. Technically, it's 3 applications of Corruption. This might set Seed of Corruption or Sow the Seeds maybe apart a bit from Rapture, but no. So the way this works is that it doesn't deal damage off Seed of Corruption popping. It only deals damage when you, the player, apply Corruption, meaning quite literally going, hey, Corruption. And it would kill it there, but I'm at 54. So it only deals damage when you actually apply Corruption to a mob yourself. Seed of Corruption does not do it. I guess other random things, it doesn't do it. You have to be the player, or the character, whatever it is, to apply the Corruption. 56 gets you Unstable Affliction rank 3, which, once again, increases its duration by 5 seconds to a total of 21, which makes you a sort of a set it and forget it kind of dot. But with everything Affliction has going on, I don't think it's a bad thing. So now, let's talk about those Rapture changes. So, last week, there were a handful of class changes that came out. This is the actual build from 5 days ago. New anima powers for Death Knights. Unholy DK's Scourge Strike is capped, and Heart Strike is capped. Hunters have new pets. Brewmasters have Celestial Brew, all this stuff. New Shadow Priest changes, which are awesome. They're insane. They're a really cool class. It's great. But this was added later on. Everybody overlooked this. And I guess if you're not really a Warlock, it probably wasn't something that really made sense to you. Mastery Potent Afflictions increases damage done by Agony and Corruption, which has been modified to Malefic Rapture, Agony, Corruption, then Siphon Life, Singularity, Vile Taint, everything else. They basically added Malefic Rapture to our Mastery modifier, which is utterly incredible. Rapture was already a great ability when it came to AoE damage, even like burst AoE damage in a sense, sort of, because Aff is, once again, applies dots and things like that, but once you get your dots rolling, having 4 or 5 shards with targets, like, let's say 5, Lady Enderva Darkbane, for example, which, by the way, if you missed that testing, I'll put the video link in the description as well, has ads that spawn every 30-ish seconds, which lines up pretty well with your Vile Taint. Being able to time the ad spawning with casting your Vile Taint, precasting a seed, and going agony, 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 Rapture spam, you decimate those ads. They get destroyed because Rapture hits that hard now. When you have a 50% increase to your Rapture damage, it's insane. The damage is utterly ridiculous. So I think this was a pretty big oversight and wasn't really pointed out by anybody because, once again, if you're not a Warlock, you probably didn't really understand what it meant. But I saw this and I read this. This is a big, big buff for Affliction. Aff's toolkit and damage profile was good regardless. It might have been a tiny bit lacking in Mythic Plus, damage-wise, on beta, but tuning hasn't really happened yet. And when I say lacking, it's probably it was lacking a bit compared to Destro, but Destro has a 1.5 Infernal, and Demo is still Demo, which is fine. So the question is, was it really lacking, or is Destro just overpowered? But at this point, well, Aff is probably pretty overpowered. Good as well with these changes. Now, seeing as how Blizzard wiped all characters, took out the Flascators, basically removed every kind of legendary crafting, conduit, soulbind resource that we had on beta last week, this part of the videos has to be a little different. We're going to have to just review legendaries and conduits through Wowhead, which is fine because we've played with these like legendaries and effects a million times on stream already. Regardless, though, let's talk about all of these 8 legendary effects, the 4 generic ones, and then the 4 AF ones, and talk about what they do for the spec. So, first of all, Claw of Endereth. Drain life now deals damage and restores health 50% faster. Now, this does not get you additional drain life ticks per cast. This does not do anything damage-wise to drain life, your baseline drain life. The only real damage amplification this legendary has is with the Night Fae Arden Wield Soul Rot ability. Soul Rot, I would show you in game, but my character is bugged. Soul Rot basically applies a dot to whatever target and surrounding targets around it, which, while that dot is active, your drain life costs no mana and hits every target that has Soul Rot on it. So it's like an AoE drain life. Now, you might be saying every spec has access to that because it's a Covenant ability. Why does it matter? Well, I mean, it matters a bit because, hey, Inevitable Demise is also a thing for Affliction. This does indeed buff every iteration of the initial drain life, AoE forked drain life, whatever you want to call it, that you cast. Now, when you go to your second drain life, your third drain life, you're not going to have the 50 stack ID damage amp if you're saving up for it. So it's a lot of initial on-demand burst, and technically this does allow you, like I said, to squeeze in more drain life cast. Soul Rot can be extended by your Dark Lair if you cast it while you cast Dark Lair while you have Soul Rot active. The interesting thing about Soul Rot is that the tooltip says for 8 seconds, your drain life costs no mana. Your Dark Lair will extend Soul Rot. When that 8 seconds is up, though, you go from 100% mana to 0 in about 3 seconds. It literally takes the full mana cost of drain life for every single drain life. You'll drain half your mana in 2 seconds. So that's the only real damage amp that you can get with Claw of Endereth. I just feel other legendaries are probably just better anyways. So, Mark of Borrow Power. Basically, Rapture having a 10% chance to refund all soul shards spent. So Rapture has a 10% chance to refund a soul shard. It's not bad. I think there are stronger effects. I think as a whole, this might be a tiny bit under-tuned. It's sort of tough even looking at Chaos Bolt and Dreadstalkers because Chaos Bolt's 2 shards, but refunding a Chaos Bolt is pretty big. I don't hate it. It might do some play. Depending on tuning, it could be better, I think. Basically, every 10 Rapture cast, you're going to get an extra Rapture. Now, depending on what setting you're in, that could be relevant. Once again, I think there are better legendaries at hand. So, Pillars of the Dark Portal. These are basically Legion portal pants here. These did see play in Legion. However, it was mostly in Mythic Plus, trying to make up ground when you died or your group wiped or whatever, casting that double gateway. And that was only a thing because in Legion, you could swap gear at Mythic Plus, which I wish would come back to the game. But regardless, I don't think these will see a whole lot of PvE play. I could be wrong, and I sort of hope I am, in a sense, but this is not for your entire raid. This is just for you. So barring you having a weird job where you have to gateway twice and you raid once, I don't see a whole lot of a reason to wear these in PvE versus a damage amp ability. Wilfred Sigil of Superior Summoning. Basically, every soul shard you spend reduces the cooldown of Summon Dark Lair by 1 second. Infernal is 2, and Tyrant is 0.3. Now, this is sort of about the same CD reduction from what I've seen as like Dreadful Calling brings on live, like 20-ish seconds, I believe, 25-ish every 2 minutes, give or take, depending on how many Raptures you're casting, what setting you're in. It's impactful, but it's not like you're reducing your Infernal to 2 minutes or less, which is normally less for your Infernal, but it's good. But once again, I think there are just better effects here. Now, there are a lot of ways to reduce your Dark Lair cooldown in Shadowlands. This ability, there's a Conduit ability, which we'll get to in a little bit here. I think one other way, actually, which does give you a sub 2 minute Dark Lair if you play that build. But once again, then you get into that territory of you're playing suboptimal Conduits and Legendaries. Like, it's just worth it, or should you just be playing something else in the first place? The AF Warlock Legendary powers, starting with Perpetual Agony of Azakir, not sure. Agony has a 20% increased chance to generate a soul shard, inspired by the Tier 19 Affliction 4-piece. I've played with a single target in raid testing. I can say it really does feel different because, number one, you're not following a drain soul rotation, which I'll get to in a minute here. But number two, I feel like you really can feel the extra shard generation. Now, once again, like the last 5 legendaries, it's strong, but it's not a guaranteed chance in a sense. I mean, it's an increased chance. I guess sort of it is, it isn't, but I don't think this is as impactful, both single target and AoE, as the last 3 choices that we have here, because these last 3, there's some heavy hitters. Sacrilege is Dark Strike. Legion Slow Ring. Corruption Ring. Corruption damage increased to 15%, which does stack with Absolute Corruption. It's important to mention, this does increase the initial corruption application damage as well, which when you as a player cast corruption on a target, it does work like that. And any target affected by your corruption also has their movement speed slowed by 15. We can cross this out and put 60, because currently on beta, it is a 60% movement slow, like Sacrilege's Dark Strike. Now, 15% and 60, well, let's be real, there's a pretty big difference there. 60 is probably a bit excessive, then maybe a bit too much. I mean, it's fine, I'll take it, but you probably don't need that much of a slow to kite most packs in Mythic Plus. When it comes to 15%, though, I don't think this is enough. I think a solid middle ground is like 30, 35-ish, give or take. I know they probably don't want it being as strong as Sacrilege's Dark Strike was in Legion Mythic Plus towards the end, but 15 just seems not very impactful. There is some merit to this stacking with the Vile Taint slow, which people often forget, but as a whole, I mean, the damage amp is still good. We wore this effect in a handful of council-based fights just for the damage amp in Legion anyways. I could very well see that being the case too in Shadowlands. Malefic Wrath. This legendary is probably the most impactful. Malefic Rapture increases the damage of your Drain Soul and Shadow Bolt by 25 for 8 seconds, stacking up 3 times. Just forget this. It increases the damage of your Drain Soul by 25% for 8 seconds, stacking up 3 times. Now, there's a lot to this effect. Number 1, Drain Soul has an execute clause built into it, meaning that its damage is increased by 100 against targets below 20% health. Number 2, we haven't talked about Covenants yet, but I'm going to talk about Necrolord a bit here. Decimating Bolt has a damage amp of baseline 200%, and if you hit a mob that's low on health, it can go all the way to 400% damage amp to Drain Soul. It is not a full, or it is not 3 ticks of Drain Soul. It quite literally applies to 3 full Drain Souls. Decimating Bolt damage amp with Malefic Rapture 75% damage amp is already incredibly strong. It makes Drain Soul 30% of our single target damage breakdown. If you throw an Execute on Drain Soul, it's quite literally 70% of our damage in Execute. You think Warriors execute hard? Affliction is the best execute class in the game right now in beta. It's not even close. It's like comparing a Ferrari to a Toyota Corolla. It's not even close, man. Like, it's not even close. We hit our Drain Soul incremental ticks, and there's like 4 or 5 in a drain, depending on your haste things and all that, hit harder than all our other abilities over the course of like 20 seconds. It hits so incredibly hard. It's not even comparable, man. It's so good. So this legendary is very strong. Now, it does alter your rotation a bit to your opener and just the way you do things, you have these 45-ish second drain windows because Decimating Bolt is a 45-second cooldown. So you sort of have these windows every 45-ish seconds where, okay, you refresh your dots, which lines up well with Singularity, by the way. You refresh your dots, okay, go into your Singularity, have Haunt up if you're playing it, then typically Rapture, Drain Soul once, twice, depending on haste levels, Rapture again to refresh the 75% buff here, then Drain Soul a third time. And depending on haste, you might have to go Drain, Rapture, Drain. But it makes Aff's single target windows pretty precise. And if you have to move or mess up your rotation in almost any way, shape, or form in that window, having like not the amount of shards you need, basically being 4 or more in that window, it hurts a good bit. It's relatively skill intensive, but it's fun. It's enjoyable. It's an enjoyable style of Aff. And I can say, playing at 6% haste like we had on our template characters, it felt rough playing Siphon Life and Haunt and everything else, trying to maintain all the dots. And it's not that I couldn't maintain the dots. I can do that. It's fine. It was quite literally I did not have enough haste with the GCD being as slow as it was. When I got the 20-ish% on a character that had crafting gear on it, it was fine. It felt great. A lot of fun. It adds a lot to Warlock. The thing is, this is pure single target damage for the most part. However, this can, in a sense, on a fight like Court of Blood, I believe it's called Court of Blood? Council of Blood. On a fight like this is the dance fight in the raid, be incredibly strong, because these 3 bosses, it's a council fight. They're all active at once. You have a handful of things running around as well, but once you kill one of these bosses, the other 2 heal back to full. So it might seem like an incredible Destro fight, per minute 2-target rolling Havoc or Havoc cleave, but your cleave on the other hand is irrelevant, barring the shard generation, maybe reapplying an Immolate, because you don't have Rolling Havoc, you don't have Flashpoint. But guess what Aff does? Aff can roll Corruption, AC, or even like Siphon Life, Writhe, whatever, on all 3 targets, dot them all, for more Dark Glare Eye Beam damage in the first place, generate more shards, more resources, more Raptures, which makes your drain windows with this Malefic Rapture Legendary even more impactful. It's an incredibly strong funnel spec right now, and a lot of it is fueled by this Malefic Wrath Legendary. The final ability we have here is also a great one. Wrath of Consumption. I never thought we'd see this back. This ability I thought caused too many problems, but hey, I'm so happy it's back. Targets die with your agony. Basically, a mob that dies with your agony on it. Grant you Wrath of Consumption, increasing all periodic damage dealt dots by 5% for 20 seconds, stacking up to 5 times. 25% damage amped to your dots. This does indeed affect Drain Soul. We tested it. Drain Soul is a dot in a sense. We tested it to make sure it does. Now, this effect was very powerful in Legion. This is one of the reasons why Warlock, Wrath of Consumption, in conjunction, see, you want to see what I did there, with Sacrilegious Dark Strike, these abilities, were the reasons, some of them, why Lock was so strong in Legion Mythic Plus. The thing here, this is a bit different. In Legion, it was just after you kill the target. It wasn't 25% though either, but it was just whenever you kill the target. So this time around, you have to have agony rolling on the target. Now, that might not seem like that big of a deal, but quite often there were ads spawned on a boss fight that died like that, and you would just passively cleave onto them, or you hit them with a Seed of Corruption, something like that, and it would be okay. This requires you to go over and manually go ... 5 times with your agonies to get those procs. Now, in Mythic Plus, if you're chain pulling packs, having agony rolling all those targets, like you should for the most part, as long as it's worthwhile, it shouldn't be a huge deal. And that's where this effect gains a lot of power. Being able to chain the 15, 20, 25% damage amps for a long time by chain pulling packs. Also on bosses that have a lot of targets that die frequently, you can get value there too. So I like this effect returning. I sort of wish that, like I said, hey, change Sow the Seeds to apply agony, and it makes this legendary effect even better. Because hey, let's be real, I don't want to have to apply 5 agonies to random mobs a second before they die. But this effect is strong. Malefic Wrath right now, best single target legendary, I feel. And these are both close in Mythic Plus. Probably this a little better, depending on your group and polls. But honestly, overall, Legendaries, Affliction got a pretty good deal. I'm happy with how our Legendaries look heading into, I guess, the first stage of Shadowlands. So when it comes to Warlock Covenant abilities, there's Covenants, Soulbinds, and then Conduits. Covenants meaning the Kyrian, Venthyr, Necrolord, Night Fae, I guess clubs, whatever you want to call them. They're called Covenants, but there's one which we talked about a bit that's pretty far ahead of the pack here in basically every scenario. So let's talk about these four and just a bit what they do for the spec before we get into Conduits, which do indeed modify these effects a bit. Starting off with Kyrian, the first one we have here, Scouring Tithe deals arcane damage instantly and more damage over 18 seconds. Basically instant damage and then puts a dot on the target. Now, this dot is indeed extended by our Summon Dark Lair and does also count towards Malefic Rapture damage. It's an extra dot for Rapture. If the enemy dies while affected by Scouring Tithe, you generate 5 soul shards. 5. If they survive, Scouring Tithe's cooldown is refreshed. It's worded oddly. Basically, if they survive, it comes off CD, you can cast it again. A 40-second cooldown, 2-second cast. So there's a lot to this ability, right? There certainly is some merit to playing as a Mythic Plus, using it on a mob, having it just rolling for extra Rapture damage, and whenever it dies, you get 5 soul shards back. Whether that's, at the end of the pack, or earlier on, I guess, mid-pack, and allowing it or using it to feel more Raptures. Now, once again, this is a powerful ability. It's sort of like Baleful Invocation meets Shadowburn for Aff. It's odd. I just don't know, comparatively to the other abilities we have and what they do for the spec, if this is really where I want to be. Obviously, generating 5 soul shards is impactful, but the thing is, we touched on this already, we have Drain Soul. And Unstable Affliction also gives you a soul shard now whenever the target dies. It doesn't cost a shard to apply UA. I don't think Aff is struggling a whole lot trying to get shards between different packs in Mythic Plus. So we're not going to talk about these here, by the way. They're generic across the board, and yeah, they're just sort of whatever. They're signature abilities. They're not like really damage-based abilities here. Venthyr, Impending Catastrophe. Calls forth a cloud of chaotic anima that travels to the target enemy, inflicting shadow damage to enemies in its path, which is odd, but it's cool. When the anima reaches the target, it explodes, inflicting either Curse of Weakness or Curse of Tongues, and dealing shadow damage over 12 seconds to all nearby enemies. So this is interesting as well. There are a few things to this. This dot is similar to Vile Taint versus Singularity, like on this. This dot from Catastrophe is indeed applied to each mob individually. It does count towards Malefic Rapture's damage as well. However, the dot effect is not extended by Summon Dark Lair. This is the only, well, sort of the only ability. Soul Rot works this way too, but it is not extended by Summon Dark Lair. I think it sort of makes sense. It's strong. It's a strong dot. Having that extra Rapture damage, AoE Rapture damage, is probably relevant enough for that to be the case. Anyways, one of the main things here with this ability is that it doesn't smart curse. Quite often it applies weakness to casters and tongues to melee mobs. I actually watched it apply Curse of Weakness, which is the melee swing time reduction, to a mob mid greater heal cast. I just sat there like, really? So if this ability was changed to Smart Curse, I know some mobs with mana do melee and vice versa, but if this ability was changed to Smart Curse, I think it would be better. It already brings some utility in Mythic Plus, and in the end, it probably a decent bit of time will apply relevant curses, but it just feels like it should do that baseline, and I'm sure there's a way to work it, even if it's just, hey, it puts tongues on melee or on mana-based mobs and weakness on casters, or you know what I'm saying? Weakness melee, tongues, mana mobs. Either way, this is probably my second overall choice for Affliction in Mythic Plus at this point. We'll come to this last. Soul Rot. We talked about this a little bit here too. Wither away all life force of your current target and 3 nearby enemies. So basically it applies a dot for 8 seconds. For the next 8 seconds, casting Drain Life will cause you to also drain life from any enemy affected by your Soul Rot. It costs 20% of your maximum health to cast it as well. So like I said, this does indeed interact with Inevitable Demise. It's a damage amp. It amplifies every Drain Life cast the first time you cast Drain Life. It's strong. It's on a 1-minute CD. I'm just not a huge fan of it. I think the actual dot doesn't hit hard enough. First off, the dot can indeed be extended by your Dark Lair. However, I just don't feel like it hits hard enough. And even with I deeming it being a talent, every other cast outside of the first one is just going to be for a miserable amount of drain life damage. I don't think it's as relevant as an ability like Decimating Bolt. So, once again, even without playing the Malefic Rapture Legendary, this effect is incredibly strong. And like we mentioned before, casting Decimating Bolt on a mob with lower health further increases the damage of your Drain Soul. Mobs are low health quite often in Mythic Plus. And the cool thing is, when you actually attack a mob with Decimating Bolt, let's see if I can find one here. The damage amp that it brings, this is gonna be 200. The damage amp that it brings, it'll snapshot it. If I kill that mob and then go over here, it's still hitting for 200%. If that mob was like, if I had a 400% damage amp in this thing, it would still be hitting this mob for 400% increased drain soul damage. It's incredibly strong. Being able to snapshot health damage amps on certain mobs and carry it over to the next pack is very strong. Now in Mythic Plus, you're not always casting full drain souls as much because of shard sniping and everything else, but the damage amp that it brings is just so strong. Even and when you have single target bosses or things like that, it's just really good. And for the most part, you can make it work. You get your full drains in early on, towards the end of the pack, you snipe for shards and cast Bolt on one mob and you're good to go. So out of these four abilities, Decimating Bolt, I feel, is just hands down the best choice here for raiding single targets, even like council-based raid fights. Impending Catastrophe is maybe like a half, maybe like it's my second choice for Mythic Plus probably at this point. But once again, Decimating Bolt is just so good, and seeing as how we're sort of stuck with one covenant, once we align ourselves with that covenant, I don't think you can go wrong with Necrolord, seeing as how good it is for Aff and even honestly Destro at this point. Getting into Conduits here, which is sort of the sockets you put into your soul binds, which are part of your chosen covenant. I know it's a lot to take in. Once again, similar to last video, I'm probably going to refer to these conduits as relics 10 times. Just know it's a conduit. I just am referring to it as a relic. So the first conduit we have here, we're going to go over the four generic ones here for each covenant here. There's one that modifies basically the covenant ability, being Scouring Tithe, Impending Catastrophe, Decimating Bolt, and Soul Rot. And then we'll get into the four Affliction ones. The first one here, Soul Tithe. It makes your Scouring Tithe have the also added clause here of when a target dies under the effect of Scouring Tithe, which is going to give you 5 soul shards. That is the 5 soul shard part of Scouring Tithe. You gain 10% increased damage from your Malefic Rapture for 10 seconds. So this is sort of cool. It's consistent across the board, which means that, hey, cool, you got 5 shards. Here's 10% damage amp to your Chaos Bolts. Here's a 10% damage amp to your Raptures and to your, I guess, Demons. That's cool. So it's cool. Once again, it holds merit. It's relevant. But the thing is, if a mob is not dying, in say it's a single target fight in Castle Nathria, and there are 3 to 4, you're going to get this effect, I don't know, one time when the boss dies, and it's irrelevant. And that's literally the issue. This only affects if the target dies from Scouring Tithe. It's just too linear, I feel. Plus, it could be a bit more of a damage amp. It's just too linear. Catastrophic Origin. Impending Catastrophes damage over time, and the inflicted curse lasts 50% longer against your primary target. So, like we said, the dot that Impending Catastrophe applies is AoE based, similar to how Vile Taint is. So, the dot that it puts on your main target, which pops sort of how like Living Bomb is around surrounding targets, that initial target's dot damage based dot here will last 50% longer, as well as the curse, which is cool. Once again, the curse is not smart cursing, so it's a bit of a damage amp. It does give you a bit of added value when it comes to Rapture on that main target, and you're probably casting Catastrophe on your priority target. So, well, it depends, but it's fine. It's not incredibly impactful, but I mean, it's not bad. It's better than this. It's not situationally a thing. Exhume Soul. We'll come back to this. Exhume Soul. Soul Rot. Damage and radius increased by 20%, but cost 7% more health. So there's no duration increase. It's just damage to Soul Rot. It's not increasing Drain Life damage. It's just straight up Soul Rot. If it increased the damage of Drain Life as well as the Soul Rot dot, this could be more impactful, but I think it's good. Yeah, if it increased Drain Life's damage too, that'd probably make it a bit more competitive. Probably a decent bit more with ID being a thing as well, but I'm just not a huge fan. It's okay. Mediocre. Once again, similar to how we talked about Decimating Bolt being incredibly overpowered. Prolonged Decimation. Shadow Bolt, which also means Drain Soul for Affliction, has a 20% chance to not consume a charge of Decimating Bolt. So that means that if you're playing Drain Soul, which you're probably going to be, whether you're an Execute or not, if you're playing the Malefic Wrath Legendary and have a Decimating Bolt damage amp on a boss of, let's say, 300%, and actually proc this effect and don't consume a charge, it's such a huge DPS increase by saving it, giving you an extra charge of Decimating Bolt or Drain Soul damage amp in a sense. Like if you're an Execute for 100% increased damage with a 350% damage amp from Decimating Bolt and a 75% damage amp from the Legendary, and seeing how all those stack, like, and you get multiple extra cast of Drain Soul, you let your dots fall. I mean, if they have to, you should be able to refresh them, but like, it doesn't matter at that point. It hits so incredibly hard. It makes up 70% of our damage in Execute, and that's without having extra Drain Life or Drain Soul like cast available to us. I've had sequences before where I cast 7 straight Drain Souls that are buffed that we just didn't consume a charge. This effect is so incredibly impactful. And look, at max rank, it's not 20%. All these conduits, they go from rank 1 to 15 or so. They increase in value. Technically, this one has a 24% damage increase, I believe. Maybe it's, yeah. It has a 48% chance, a 1 in 2 chance to not consume a Drain Soul charge. This ability is so incredibly strong. This is sort of the balancing fear that everyone's had. This is so incredibly strong compared to everything else. It's not even funny. There's no point in even looking at these. Even if they nerf, Decimating Bolt from 200% baseline and a max of 400% in Execute to 100 and 200, it doesn't make a difference. It's still so incredibly good. It doesn't make a difference. These are the tuning concerns people have had for a while. There's one Covenant, it's just so far ahead. So, well, if they nerf it at a certain point, hopefully it's before people make their choice of Covenants, because Neck for Lord looks really, really good for Affliction. So these are all potency conduits here. Potency conduits are the DPS-based ones. There are endurance conduits and finesse conduits. I'll look at them briefly. Basically, Drain Life, more healing. Hellstones give you more leech. This is actually relevant because I think it's more relevant than the other two here, a decent bit. I mean, this is sort of like unpredictable. When you're popping a Hellstone, that leech is relevant. You're popping a Hellstone when you're low on health. This is actually impactful. This is good. Demonic Momentum, Finesse Conduit. Demonic Circle will increase movement speed by X for 5 seconds. I mean, honestly, like, you can see the speed increase here. It's relevant. Speed increases in PvE, PvP, just in general, are often undervalued. This is a good conduit. Reduces the cooldown of Feldom by 45 seconds. It's a 3-minute CD. I mean, it'll be a longer CD reduction on Fel Domination, I'm sure, but, I mean, it doesn't really matter a whole lot. Like, pet summons are still too long anyways. And final one here, damage required to break your fear, increase by X. Doesn't matter. Okay, so now you can play 3 potency conduits. Every single Soulbind will have 3 potency conduits. They might not right now. Blizzard has stated when they go live, they all will, which does sort of help the balancing of Soulbinds in a sense, even though like some of their abilities are very different from others. Looking at the actual Affliction Warlock potency Soulbind conduits. Cold Embrace increases the effectiveness of Shadow's Embrace by 33%. This stacks to 72%. So basically, baseline here, it makes it go, I don't know what, 369. It goes like 4, 8, 12. Yeah, like a 12% damage amp instead of a 9 off Shadow's Embrace. The crazy thing is, like, it's going to be, I don't know what, like a 30-ish% damage amp at max rank here. That's really strong. That's really strong. Like, unless my math is wrong, that's really, really strong. Because you can see the ranks of scaling weight here, like, that's a lot. Seeing as how this is not just a dot increase, this is quite literally a damage increase to everything. Your trinket procs, whatever other effects you have, your borrowed power effects, this increases their damage. Like, that's really strong. Corrupting Leer. Agony and Unstable Affliction damage has a 3% chance, which you can see increasing here to 5.8, to reduce the cooldown of Summon Dark Lair by 5 seconds. This is another one of those traits talked about that can get your Dark Lair CD reduced. Now, in multi-target settings, you can play, you have multiple agonies rolling. You have one UA rolling, but you have multiple agonies rolling. So, I mean, when it procs, it's okay, I guess. Like, if you're playing Dark Caller with Dark Soul Misery already, you're looking to sync these two cooldowns, Dark Caller and Dark Soul. The issue, I feel, is like, I mean, not really an issue, but just if you're playing this, maybe with the other CD reduction effect, not Dark Caller, the other one we talked about earlier, the Legendary effect, for example, right? You're going to be looking at probably a minute Dark Lair, minute and 20. What are you playing here? Creeping Death, like Soul Conduit? I don't know. It just seems odd. Doesn't seem super impactful. But once again, in council-based fights, playing this effect with maybe the Legendary or something else in general, it could give you a 220-ish Dark Lair, 210. And if you're able to play Haunt in that setting as well, that's a pretty big damage increase. So it could be good in certain settings. I'm definitely keeping my eye on this Corrupting Leer effect. Focus Malignancy. Malefic Rapture deals 30% increased damage to your targets, plural. So there's hope for UA to be uncapped again, right? Targets suffering from Unstable Affliction. Now it goes up to, I thought it was 25, actually, on live, or on beta. I think this is wrong. I'm pretty sure it's 25%. It even says here. I think it's wrong, but either way, it's a damage increase to Rapture, single target wise, in a sense, because only one target has UA rolling on it. It's impactful. People were complaining about Rapture not feeling like our main single target spender. Like they wanted more of a Malefic Grasp kind of ability back, and it's what I cited in my Wowhead article too, but this was before Conduits came out. I think it goes a long way in sort of helping differentiate Rapture AoE wise and plus to Rapture single target wise. If you're playing as Conduit and +2, it also gives you a bit more funnel damage on that main target because you will have UA rolling on a target most of the time. So a strong Conduit. I like it a good bit. This is definitely going to be one I have my eye on playing. So the final one we have here, Rolling Agony. Increase the duration of Agony by 4 seconds. Nothing else to that, really. Now, people have pointed out, like, obviously its scale is probably to 8.3 seconds. Like, okay, it gives you more time to fill with more cast and more redotting of things. Like, I mean, it might make juggling Siphon Life in Council 3-4 base target fights easier. It very well might. And, I mean, if you can, like, there is merit to this. Like, single target wise, Mythic Plus wise, I don't care much. It's fine. But, like, I mean, like, because I'm typically playing AC or Writhe and Plus anyways. But, like, when it comes to a fight like, you know, the dance fight, Council of Blood, or Council, yeah, exactly. Having 3 permanent targets active here, they do heal back to full. But, for example, like, this might put you in a spot where you can play Siphon Life relatively easily. Because, hey, you know, my Agony is now 8 seconds longer on every single target. In the end, though, the ones I have my eye on the most, Rapture. 30% damage increase on your UA target. Cold Embrace and Prolonged Decimation. It's so good. You can play 3 potency conduits. These are the 3: Decimation, Cold Embrace, and Focused Malignancy that I play with the most in raid testing, and I was very impressed with them. Afflictions, conduits look pretty good. Now, it's a bit hard to show you guys the Malefic Wrath legendary single target rotation that I've been following because Conduits are gone and Soulbinds are gone and Covenants are gone, and technically I am a Necrolord, but I shouldn't be because I'm level 57. I'm just bugged out. So I'm going to show you guys the rotation I've sort of been following for the most part. I've gone back and forth between 2 openers. However, I feel this one is probably better. It depends a bit on haste and tuning and all that, but trying to get Shadow's Embrace up before casting your Malefic Raptures and going into your Decimating Bolt cycling, I think is probably a little better. Now, you guys are probably going to notice the weak aura in the center of my screen is a bit different. I have been updating these weak auras. This is not publicly available yet. It should be in a few days. I'm just trying to work out all the kinks for it here. But let's get into this. So what I've been following for the most part, this is the build we're playing here. We're playing we'll play Dark Caller. It's fine. Managing Haunt is fine too. But let's just get this going here. So we're playing Dark Caller. So typically, I've been opening on precasting. I was precasting a Bolt for a while, but with this sequencing of wanting to get your Shadow's Embrace to 3 stacks and not playing Haunt, whether you're playing Dark Caller or not, Haunt applies 1 stack of Shadow's Embrace. I have not been precasting a Decimating Bolt because, well, we'd be wasting our first drain cycle. So what I've been doing recently, just honestly, like normal opener, just go Agony, Corruption, Siphon Life, Dark Soul, Singularity, UA, Dark Glare, Drain. Shadow's Embrace to 3 stacks. I need to change the weak aura. I'll Rapture once for 5 shards. Bolt, Rapture, 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 Drain. Now our dots are following here. I'll Rapture again, refresh dots to refresh our Malefic Rapture legendary effect. Rapture again, and then go Drain. And then we can Drain typically 1 more time, and dots start falling. You see UA is falling here. We can go into our UA, refresh Corruption. Siphon's going to be falling. So is Agony. We have about 18 seconds left on our Decimating Bolt. So we can probably Rapture once here. And then we're going to start pooling shards here for our next Decimating Bolt cycle. You can see Singularity lines it pretty well with Bolt. Corruption's falling. Siphon. There's that. We'll go into Singularity. I'll throw a Drain in to refresh this again. We will go Decimating Bolt, and we'll Rapture once or twice here. Now, Rapture twice, refresh, Rapture again, refresh. We can go into a Drain. That shard coming back there is super impactful. I should refresh my UA, but that shard coming in there is super impactful because let's just go Rapture again, UA, Drain, and hopefully we get another shard back there, and there you go. So, like, it's important to have enough shards going into these cycles to know, okay, I can get myself to 3 stacks on my Legendary, and then within reason, no, I probably have a shard or 2 to refresh and go into an extra Drain or 2. You can see here, once again, we have 13-ish seconds coming up on our Decimating Bolt. So the sequencing is fairly tight. However, we're not at a very high level of haste here. Haste makes everything easier, drains faster, everything else. And it really just makes the Malefic Wrath Legendary build feel so much better, so much easier. And honestly, this version of Aff is just, being real with you, an absolute blast. Thanks for watching, guys. I hope this video gave you all a better perception, understanding of truly how overpowered or how Affliction Warlock looks in Shadowlands beta so far. Once again, I apologize for not being around over the last week or so as much on stream and sort of on YouTube as well, within reason. I lost my voice a few days ago. It's mostly come back now, and we have a big week ahead of us, so I'm happy to get this video out at the start of the week. Once again, let me know what you guys think of it in the comment section below. Any questions you have, feel free to drop them down there. I'll be sure to get back to you. All my weak auras, profiles, and add-ons are indeed available to you guys for free on my Twitch. Swing by, drop a follow. Feel free to ask any questions you might have. I'm more than happy to help there. Honestly, like I said, Affliction just looks really good. Even before the Malefic Rapture buffs, we looked good. Now we look good single target wise, we look good AoE wise, we look good console wise. Destro looks good too, but with these Malefic Rapture buffs, Affliction has a lot. I'm on a flight path, by the way, in game. It's really bright. A lot of reach, and it might be the most versatile, adaptable spec in the game so far. Warlock is already the best class in Shadowlands beta, hands down. Like, I'm not kidding. Like, I think it is at this point. Tuning hasn't really happened yet, though, boys, so it's important to keep that in mind as well. We very well might see nerfs coming down the line. Tuning to Malefic Rapture's damage amp, probably some tuning to Decimating Bolt, but we have to see where that goes. And while it might not be fun to get nerfed, it's much better to get nerfed in beta than it is week 2 of Shadowlands. So, yeah. Thanks again for hanging out, boys. If you enjoyed the video and want to see more WoW content, be sure to hit the subscribe button below. We are less than 300 subscribers away from 20,000, which is utterly insane. I truly, truly appreciate all the support, guys. Once again, any questions or would like to get my weak auras, profiles, or add-ons, feel free to swing by stream anytime or hop in the community Discord. I'll have a link to that down below as well. I'm more than happy to help. Thanks again, dudes, and I will see you all again soon on stream. I hope you like the lights, by the way. Peace.